let me know what are some issues that you're dealing with this year. I know some people said that this is their they just got this role. It's a new role, and so they're learning the process. But um, there may be some
No,
issues that. Go ahead.
no procedures.
Okay, no procedures. That's important. Anybody else would like to share? Okay, so we'll go on. I'm glad that you mentioned no procedures because that's pretty much what this is about. We'll talk about implementation a little bit, but um, we'll talk about what are some things that you should have in place and procedures. All right, so you may notice that the title is "What's in Your Wallet." And you know that's from the Capital One thing. But I actually, when I was thinking about this, I had an experience with using the Apple Wallet, and I don't know if those of you that have an iPhone ever used Apple Wallet, but what it is, it's a way that you could put in your information in one place and it organizes. Like if you're going on a flight, you could put your itinerary in there, your hotel information and all that stuff. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool. You have everything right there. And a lot of times when we have a lot of stuff, we need one place to have it at, and that's what made me think of a wallet. The wallet that we have, that a lot of us carry around, is our way that we keep track of our stuff, and we keep it secure. But you ever have a wallet that you have so much stuff in it that you have to clean it out item by item? You have to, just like going, I know it's in here, I'm pretty sure I put it in here. And then, or something that you was supposed to be in your wallet, but it wasn't. You know. So today, what we're going to talk about is how to curate or put all together your 504 responsibilities, and we're going to review the process and procedures that you should have in place to keep your 504 wallet in order. Um, one of the things that I have found out just in doing this job is that a lot of people, the school districts have campuses that are doing different things. So we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page, everybody's doing the same thing, and that we don't have different procedures or processes in one campus or in one building than is in another. And so one of the ways that we'll do that is looking at Section 504 procedures. So one of the things that I learned in a training that I thought was just really good, and it could apply over a bunch of things, is asking yourself 4 questions. So the first question is it there? So when we're looking at procedures, or we're looking at operating guidelines, or we're looking at policies, one of the things you want to know is, do we have them? Okay. And so if you have them, um, you want to look over and make sure, are they good? Are we having policies and procedures that was back in 2001, and now it's 2018, and we know that things have changed. So we want to make sure that our policies and procedures are up to date. The other thing that to ask yourself, is it being used? We know that when we give people copies of things, procedures, operating guidelines, or whatever, they tend to take it, put it on the shelf, and don't think about it again until something comes up, and that makes it a problem. So we want to make sure that the policies and procedures, people know it and it is being used. And then the last thing is it making a difference? So have you evaluated the procedures that you're using, and has it made a difference? Not only a difference in students receiving accommodations and being successful, but has it made a difference in people understanding what they're supposed to do? Does it make a difference in uh, everybody being understanding what they're supposed to do? So everybody being on one accord and that they know, you know, what our procedure is. So as we go throughout um, each of these areas, I want you to consider these 4 questions. Is it there? Is it good? Is it being used? Is it making a difference? Okay, so the first thing that we'll go over, which is probably one of the most important things, is you have to have operational guidelines. So that's going to be your framework. Whenever there's a question, like if somebody calls me and asks me something, one of the things I would say, well, what does your guidelines say? And sometimes people they either don't have guidelines or their guidelines are old. So you want to make sure that you have your operating guidelines and you look at what do your guidelines say when you do have a question. So my question to you guys is, where can you find your operating guidelines? Would somebody like to tell me how do they keep their operating guidelines? Let me know you guys are out there. Okay. Everyone, I have a comment says we don't have any. Anybody else like to comment? Okay, somebody says they're new. I know there's some people that are not new on the call. I mean, on the meeting. Would you like to share? Okay. Well, one of the things that I will say that is very one of the nice things that Region 10 has done is we have partnered with CESD, and that is Richard Lindsay and Martine, their law firm, and they have Section 504 um, forms and procedures where you can where you can use those. Okay, and some people say you're transitioning to using eStar for 504, so you'll have your procedures there, and the somebody else says that there's online, which is really very good. Um, the thing is, can everybody access them, or do you access them, to look over them and to make sure, one, to make sure they fit what your school procedures, what you want your procedures to be, because they can be kind of canned. So you want to make sure that it matches what your school wants to do. And the other thing, make sure that they're, accessible to the people that need to have them assessed, and that you review them periodically, and I would say not just one time a year, but, as changes go on, like some of the changes that we're having, right now, making sure that you're looking at them and making the changes as needed. Thank you guys for sharing. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about in procedures is a child find notice. If you look at this, it looks pretty much like the special education one. And what you want is to be able to, for people who may, especially parents who may have a child who is struggling, for them to easily find out who their child find person is. So I make a recommendation that you have it like on your website with a contact. And I say must have a name and a way to contact, but I don't think that that's actually in law. I just think that's a really good practice, or at least have a number to contact. If it's hard to find, and one of the things that I do before I go out into a school district, I will go online to see if I can find their child find person, and or child find information. And so it's been hit or miss. Some people have it and some people don't. But you have to have it for your special ed, so sometimes it just makes it easier to put it with your put it with your special ed one. Just want to let you guys know that we have, it's mainly special ed, but if you want to see some of the child find activities that our special ed group is doing, and I may have to move this over. If you click on the link, you guys got a PDF, and if you click on the link, it takes you to our Child Find website, and there's a lot of different documents, brochures, posters, press releases. I mean, it's a lot for Child Find, and you can take that and you can do whatever you would like to do it to make it your own. Your Child Find obligation is not as significant as would be for special ed, but you may want to use some of the same things that the special ed group does. Okay, so you want to understand your child find reach. I know that some of you that are on here are in charter schools. You have to tailor the activities that make up your charter school because you don't have the same regional or area obligation as a school does, but you do have an obligation to identify and locate every child with a disability that is within your charter school. Okay, so you do have the discretion regarding what your child find activities look like. You want to make sure that you identify students that may need early intervention, and don't place that responsibility on a parent to refer the child. That's why I said it would be nice, um, if the parent does suspect that there is something going on, that they have a person to contact. And then train your staff to refer concerns to appropriate personnel. Don't just let it linger. One of the things that I just had this came from a letter from, I think it was from OSEP, but also had a parent where it talks about response to intervention and how long kids are spending in that tier 2 or tier 3, and not being referred to 504 or to special education. So we want to make sure that staff understands when's the appropriate time to start referring and who's the appropriate person to refer to. And then also when a parent, requests, make sure you provide the parent rights and procedural safeguards documents to them. When you're thinking about that, don't forget that you may need to translate documents into other languages besides English. The nice thing about the CSD forms, and I'm sure other companies that you use, they're in English and in Spanish. Here's some other things to think about too, especially if you deal with people from different cultures or different countries, which we're seeing a lot more of. Being sensitive to any perceptions that they may have about having a child with a disability. Um, so you want to just be very aware that, parents may not understand or may be very hesitant when you're talking about um, some type of evaluation. So you want to make sure that you take the time to explain things to them. And then the other thing is that there are many cases that end up in lawsuits um, because of that first point of communication, that maybe the parent was turned away or wasn't given the proper information for to initiate a referral. So you do want to make sure that everybody is trained. I think we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more, but especially front staff, people in the front office, that when a parent has a concern about accommodation or disability, that you don't say no to a parent's request. You make sure that that information is passed on to the right person, so that I always say go through the process. Don't make a predetermination on whether the child will qualify or the child won't qualify. Go through the process so you'll have that documentation that will support your decision. Any questions or comment on child find? Okay, the next part is the referral. The referral, that's where you gather your information on how the child is doing. You're looking not just academically, but behaviorally and socially. And that serves as the basis on whether, a 504 evaluation should be sought. So you want to one of the things that people are struggling with, from what I'm hearing, is how much information should you have, and that's going to be determined, on the school. You don't want to make sure that they gather so much information that it impedes going forward. For a 504 evaluation, you don't have to have as much as what you would do for special ed, so it should not be something that keeps the group from having the 504 meeting. So my question with this is, what happens once the referral is filled out? Do you guys have a process that you use, that that once a teacher fills out a referral, who it goes to, and then how does it get to the committee? Would somebody be willing to share? I know you guys are all in chat, but you can unmute yourselves too if you wanted to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Angela, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Once the teacher has, well, they know that the referral needs to be turned into our 504 coordinator, which is our counselors on our campuses.
Yes.
And then that initiates the counselor to go ahead and send home the notice of rights and the parent input and the consent for evaluation.
Okay. And then I thank you for sharing that. And then somebody said, at my campus, when a referral is made, it comes to me. They're the counselor 504 coordinator. And then I contact the parent and initiate the 504 process. So good. That, I think that is important, that we need to make sure that, once a referral comes in, or parent may be talking to the teacher, because that's going to be their point of contact, that teacher knows not to sit on that, or knows when they need to go ahead and make that referral, even if they're not seeing it. They shouldn't just say, well, I don't I don't think he's 504. They may say, I think he may be, you know um, something else. Maybe he's not applying himself, or lazy, or whatever. But we don't want them to make that determination ahead of times, where it seems like it's a denial of a free, appropriate public education. But have them go through the process and let the committee make that decision, or the coordinator, however you guys do that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so after the referral, and you um, decide that we're going to go forward, you need to notice and consent for the evaluation. And I was looking at I can't remember exact year, but I was looking at something where there was one time where I think it was um, OCR. Anyway, it was had somebody in the government had said that you did not need a consent for 504. And so I just because I got a call about that not too long ago, just want to make sure that people understand that you do need notice and consent. A while back, several years, that was not the case, but you got to make sure that the parents understand what they're agreeing to. And I'm going back to even what I said about parents from different cultures, and you just want to make sure that they understand um, what that consent is for, and what the evaluation is going to be made up of. Okay, so you want to give the parents, some of you mentioned that, and I mentioned it before, you want to make sure that the parent is given their notice of rights and their procedural safeguards. And you want to make sure that the parent understands, their right. A lot of times people just give it to them and just say, here's your rights, and here's your notice. But you want to make sure that they understand. Um, so you should give the notice of rights at the time that the consent for the initial evaluation is sought. Like you said, the counselor does a lot of that when they contact the parent, and then they give that notice. If your school should decide that they're going to decline that parent request, if a parent requests it and the school decides that we're not going to do a 504 evaluation, then you need to give them their notice of rights and procedural safeguard. You also need to give them notice anytime the notice of rights is revised. So you want to make sure that that is given to them. I know that we give out by request the CESD forms. They come out in November. So I send those out when people, I send those out to, if I know who the 504 coordinator for the district is, but I'll also send those out to people who ask. And I'll just say that this is a part of the administrative cooperative, so not everybody is going to get that if you're not part of that cooperative. Okay, you also need to give the notice of right when the student reaches the age of majority. Of course, that's 18 in our state. So you need to give the notice to the adult student. You also have to give the notice when there is a manifestation determination. So that's another time to give notice. Another time to give notice is when a parent requests a Section 504 meeting, but for whatever reason the school refused to have the meeting, then you need to give the parent notice of procedural safeguards and their rights. And then any other time the parent may request it, you need to give them the notice. And one of the things that is recommended is that if you're not doing an evaluation, having a meeting, then you need to have a way to document that the notice was given to the parent. So you can have a parent contact log or in the student file log. So you want to make sure that you're documenting whenever those notices are given out to a parent. Okay, the next thing that you should have is a process for teacher input for the 504 evaluation. You want information about the classroom performance and you want information about behavior. I can't stress enough, don't let the academics, just because a child is doing well, overshadow some of the other things that may be happening, such as the social emotional part that a kid may be experiencing or any type of behavior. So you just want to take all that into consideration. How that looks in different schools, one of the things that we're trying to address is how much information is enough information and how much is too much. But more than anything, we want to make sure that the teachers give the right information. And if you have the CSD forms, they do have a form for teacher input. The other thing that you want to get is also parent input for the 504 evaluation. You want to seek information about the how the child is functioning at their activities at home. It also allows the parent to be a part of the process. The parent is not required to be at the meeting, although most schools want the parent to be there and have a process for them to be a part. But even if they chose not to, the parent input is very important. And I think it really is important. Another part is important is if the parent is seeing some things and the school is not. They're not seeing those things in the classroom. It's a really good idea to get information from the parent, and I always use the words, tell me more, or tell me what does that look like when you see that. So make sure that you just don't negate parent, not just their input, but parent concerns, that they're addressed appropriately. Does anybody have any particular way that they get teacher or parent input, or especially, I'm really especially interested in teacher input and what kinds of things that you get from the teacher in order to say, okay, this is enough information for us to move on for a referral or for an evaluation. Anybody like to share? Okay, I don't hear anybody, and just check and make sure nobody put a question in the chat. Okay. The next one is, excuse me, the notice of the 504 meeting. And so, okay, before I go on, I give people a little bit of time. Okay. Let me see. Okay, some of the things that people said. What input, I guess this question, what input do you use for reevals? The parent input in the forms provided by Region 10 ask questions that do not need to be asked each time. Yes, and some use RTI data use from teachers. Since send out a file from eSped that the teacher completes about 2 weeks before the 504 committee meeting. We discuss the teacher's responses before the meeting. That's good. Let me ask you a question. Since somebody mentioned RTI, do you, when a student is struggling, do all of your students that you're considering maybe a 504 referral, do they go through your RTI process first? And while you're thinking or writing, one of the reasons why I'm asking is I'm trying to put together, I don't know, I'm trying to put together a flow chart, and I've got a couple of them that I've seen that talks about Section 504 and special ed and RTI, and what are some things that you need to consider, some of those decision points that you need to look at when you're saying, okay, this should be a special ed referral, this should be a 504 referral, or they should maybe continue in the RTI process. Do any of you have anything like that? Okay, I've got a yes, and then I've got, if RTI is done first, the one that says they use RTI. If not, we use the same process, forms from your system. Okay, and then somebody says, if it is a parent request, it may differ based on the situation, ADHD and medical. Yes, that wouldn't have to go through that. Okay. And then if it's for dyslexia, yes, asthma, no. Okay, good. This comment that Angela says, in some cases we have initiated the RTI process so that student could get supports while the 504 SPED process is going on, depending on student case and struggle. And that's good because it really needs to be, individualized, and, we have to look at all of the supports that we can give. And then, of course, that RTI process is important because you'll know what works and what didn't work, and that will really help you when it comes to the accommodations. Thank you very much for sharing. So the next part is the notice of the meeting. And so, of course, you'll have to document what is sent to the parent prior to each meeting, and making sure that they know what will occur and, of course, the time and the place. And like I said, the parent is not a required member of the committee, but I don't think I've come across a school district or charter school that hasn't included them. But in any case, you still want to make sure that they're understanding what is going to be happening. Okay, somebody asked a question. If we see the RTI process working, do we still need to continue to 504? That's a very good question. And this is what I would say. I would say yes, because one of the things, I always say go through the process, and one of the things that 504 adds is protections. So, it's a law that I assume that everybody knew, about the 504 law, so that's why I didn't go into it, but it's a it's a non-discriminating law. It's an equal access law. So you want to make sure that even though you got process that are working, you still want to make sure that that the student has those protections under 504. That is just my thought, because if they were still in the RTI process and it was working, um, because we're looking at either having a physical or mental impairment. So you still want to go through the process. They may be eligible for 504, but may not need any of the services that would normally, or accommodations that would normally fall under 504, and you still do the process. I am interested in what you guys think. Those are just my thoughts. Anyone else have a comment on that question? Okay, we'll go on. The next part is initial evaluation, periodic reevaluation, and results. So you want to make sure that the law says a periodic reevaluation at least every 3 years. So you want to make sure that during the initial evaluation and the reevaluation that you ask the right questions, and that you review the required data. Make sure that the data is updated. Um, Again, you're going to send the notice to the parents regarding your evaluation results to indicate what has occurred. I'm sorry, I went too far. And to make sure that the parents understand the results too. And let me just say too, not only the parents understand the results, but also the people that are going to implement the accommodation. So you want to make sure that it is understandable to everybody, and make sure that especially the people that are going to be the implementers of, like I said before, understand. A lot of times we just go to, even with special ed, we go to what are IP goals and objectives, what is the plan, and we don't always go back and look to see and making sure that the evaluation matches the results matches what we put in the plan. Okay, so I got another comment to the question. about continue with RTI process said the student may need accommodations in order to make sure that they're implemented. That's that that is right. The student needs an IEP. So even if RTI is working, we have to make sure what is happening in RTI continues. Right? Absolutely. You want to make sure that it continues, and again, what they're doing may be a part of the accommodation for student, and it's where it's documented that this has been really helpful, and to the place where the student may not need it anymore, or or maybe a referral to something else. But you want to keep both of those things going, and when something is working, you don't want to dismiss that, but you want to make sure that they continue their protection. Okay, so after you do the evaluation, you got to make sure that there's consent for services, and that the parent, again, understands their consent. And the parent can also revoke consent for 504 service too. So you just want to document whatever the parent decides to do, whether they agree or whether they don't agree, but just know that you will still do a services plan for the child, and saying that we're offering this, and then document that the parents declined those services. Okay, this next part is a student services plan and implementing accommodations. This part right here is probably one of the most important parts, and can also at some time be a whole training alone by itself on what that looks like. But I just want to go over a couple things that stress the importance of this plan. When a plan is created and it's delivered to the parent and school personnel, they have a duty to implement the plan, and somebody mentioned that about implementation. So one of the things that they have to really understand is their responsibility in implementing the accommodations. It is not negotiable. It is not, we hear this, it's not fair. If I do it for this child, I have to do it for everybody else. That should not even be a problem, because it is law and they have to do it. I think one of the things that we don't do is investigate further enough with people that are struggling to understand that, and maybe providing them support through ongoing training. So, training used to be, face to face and stuff like that, but now, we have different formats that we could do, such as, newsletters and webinars and meetings and stuff like that. So, it shouldn't just be at the beginning of the year, here's information about 504. It should be something that is provided ongoing. Also, you want to increase the people who are the implementers, usually the teachers. You want to increase their participation in the process. So you want to make sure you keep them involved. You want to get their feedback in order to make it easier for them, because I know with a lot of students, and we are increasing the number of special ed students, not special ed students, the number of Section 504 students, it can get daunting. So any way that you can increase their participation, and also help them to continue to be involved, to help maybe they have some ideas to streamline the process or what could be helpful for everybody. You want to take that into consideration. I was just reading or started reading a article talking about the increase in Section 504 population, how it strains a district's resources. So, we can't consider, money because it's an unfunded, mandate, but we have to think smarter, and getting everybody involved is one of the ways to do that. The next thing is write clear accommodations. So we want to make sure that when we write those accommodations that they match the evaluation information that we got, whether it's from the RTI process, from parents, from the teachers and others. We want to make sure that the accommodations are necessary and they're reasonable and they're very clear. I always ask the question, what would that look like in your class? I had a call not too long ago where the parent, it said extra time, and the parent, the child had missed, I think it was an assignment, and the teacher gives the child 2 extra days and said, I gave the child extra time. And the parent, but the child didn't turn her assignment in until 2 weeks later. So, the parent's saying, well, it's extra time. I gave her, she's supposed to get extra time. So it's not clearly communicated. What does that look like? Is it just extra time on homework assignments, extra time on tests? So we need to make sure that, again, they're reasonable, and not a whole lot of accommodations. Usually 5 or 6 are really pretty good. You don't have, I always say here, more is not necessarily better. And so you want to make sure that the accommodations that the student uh, is getting is making that difference. So you can ask your 4 questions. Is it there? Is it good? Is it being implemented? And is it making a difference? You can ask those with accommodations too, and then make any changes if it's not. Improve communication with teachers. I think I've already talked about that, what that entails. And then implement check-ins. Just every now and then check and see how the teachers are doing. Is everything going okay? Do they need any training? How are they documenting their accommodations? Those kinds of things. And then if you have people that refuse to implement the accommodations, how are you going to address those? Probably definitely need to have a face-to-face to remind them of their legal responsibility. I think the campus campus administration, such as the principal, needs to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Use positive reinforcements and compliment teachers who are doing a good job, and communicate that to their supervisor. And if they're good at doing accommodations with students a certain way, then I think it would be good, maybe have them do some training, or give a 2-minute, here's a great accommodation that I use in the classroom. And then evaluate your communication with teachers. Again, that's listening feedback from them. What could they do? What help could they use? What is it that they need that would help them to implement these accommodations? So my other question is, how do you evaluate appropriate accommodations and implementations? Do you have a process where you're allowing that to happen? Give you a couple minutes. Okay, while you're still thinking about it, I'm going to go on to the next one. Just some other considerations and programs that you consider. Manifestation determination. So when there is a disciplinary removal, this is one that could be done all by itself too. Um, your committee needs to document the required, go through the questions that they're supposed to answer, and make sure that the parents are aware of what the results were. So again, follow the process. I did go out to one school where they had several campuses, and one campus didn't know that you needed to do a manifestation determination on in 504 also. So make sure that everyone knows that there is a process for this, and when you're thinking about removing a child for disciplinary reasons, that they need to go through that. The other consideration is dyslexia. And this is an area that because Region 10 is the state lead for dyslexia, and we have a dyslexia person. We have a state lead, and we have a Region 10 dyslexia person. I don't get into that a whole lot, even though it falls under 504. We work together when there are issues between us, but don't forget that dyslexia, even though we know it is a specialized program, we're one of the few states that separate it like we do, and it's in general ed. But just note that it is there. It is under 504. And that dyslexia can also rise to the level of being a learning disability. So it could be also under, sorry about that, it could also be under special education too. So there's nothing that prohibits that from being in the dyslexia program. I mean, using the word dyslexia in the special ed program. And if that is the case, then special ed, they no longer become a separate 504 program, but the special ed department handles whatever specially designed instruction they need, whatever accommodations or modifications that they need. I know that's been a struggle for people to put their head around, but the law has made it pretty clear you're not in Section 504 and special ed. When you're in special ed, you still technically are a Section 504 student, but special ed, the way they put it, special ed is your Section 504 committee. Okay, the other thing that I also want to mention, because this has come up a couple times, is general education homebound. And sometimes you have some students that may need to receive services from the home. And a couple years back, they used to qualify them for special ed. Then they would be special ed homebound, and then when they got back to school, they would take them out of the special ed program. So now we have a general education homebound program. You have to have that in your policies, that's what you are going to do. I think most people do if they use the TASB policies. But also, I want to say that not only do the forms have information about determining homebound services, but also I refer a lot to the Student Attendance Accounting Handbook, which is on the TEA website, and it has a lot of information about general ed homebound also. And then the last thing on other considerations that I want to mention is individual health plans. And this is important. There was some information that came out from OCR that said if you have students on individual health plans or health plans, that you probably need to be considering 504 also. And so if you're not doing that, not making that connection with the nurse at your school and finding out which students are on there, you may want to go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're going to end a little bit early, but I have some resources I want to show you. But I want to just say take time to check your Section 504 wallet periodically. Ask those 4 questions. Is it there? Is it good? Is it being used? Is it making a difference? Does anybody have any questions or any comments? Can somebody let me know you can still hear me? Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. All right. So what are some of the things that your next step should be? I'm hoping that you're thinking about this, but I want to show you some resources that we have available and some things that I want you to think about as you're doing next steps. Okay, so here is this first resource is called Accommodation Central. It is done by Region, it was put together by Region 13. And what it does is it allows you to, if you have a student, okay, I'll get to your question. If you have a student that you're trying to figure out what is the best accommodation, for the student, Accommodation Central is really good because you can type in the issue that the student is dealing with, and it'll give you some some example accommodations. All right, so there is a question that's come up. Is there a clear line between RTI and 504? And I'm going to tell you, I'll talk to you, but that's one of the things that I've been, working on trying to address. And when I said the flow chart, that is what I'm looking at. And I'll talk to you some more about that. I'll email you some more about what I'm looking at. The other thing is another great resource is the Center for Parent Information and Resources called the Hub. If you've been around for a while, you might remember Nietzsche, who had all these really great one-pagers that talked about different disabilities, and you could pull those down. They were great for parents, great for teachers who wasn't really sure what they how to address certain things. So the Center for Parent Information Resources actually took that over. And so they have that still there, but they also have a really nice page on accommodations. So if you're still struggling, what's good accommodations? You don't want to keep using the same accommodations over and over again, or every kid gets the same accommodations, then you'll want to visit that website. Okay, one of my favorite YouTube channels is a young lady who has ADHD, and it's called How to ADHD. And so she has a lot of different YouTube content areas that talk about, she has one that talks about the law and letter from OCR. Fidget, she has one that talks about fidgets and different things. And so she's entertaining, but she is using her disability to be not only an advocate, but to be a person who is informative to others. Navigate Life Texas is one of the resources. It comes from Health and Human Services and may have some information that would be helpful, especially when you have kids with healthcare needs. The Parent Companion, also done by I think it was done by one of our service centers, but it talks about the first 5 years, and it's designed for parents, but almost all these things that are designed for parents are great for teachers and everybody. So this one talks about a 504 plan, and they have other articles in there that you could look at. Section 504 on the government website has frequently asked questions. It's probably not, I'm always having to, on the government website, I'm always trying to have a trouble trying to find things because they have so much stuff on there. A lot of it's letters that were sent, but this is a link for the FAQ, which may or may not be helpful. It's pretty much law and what it is, but if you're wanting, what that looks like and a little bit more of what is useful for you for school, these other resources are better. Understood.org is probably one of my favorite resources. It was created for parents, and what it does is you can take let's just take ADHD, and you go in there and say, I want to know more about ADHD. So the first thing that comes up, or I think you might be able to choose, is they have a child with ADHD that tells you what it's like to have that. And you can pick it by grade level too. So the child tells you, then a professional comes and talks to you more about it. And then the other part that I think is really cool is they give you a simulation and what it's like to have that disability. So if you're wanting to look at how to make people a little bit more sensitive to what kids are struggling with or going through, this is a really good one. And then they give you some ideas on some things that you could do with the struggles that kids go through. Okay, if you're all into pretty much what the law says in straight black and white, the Utah Parent Center, this is something I just kind of accidentally discovered. They have a really good modules on 504. It's, again, designed for parents, but it's good for anybody. I tell you, it won't. The person that speaks is very clear about what 504 is and the responsibilities of the schools. Another one of my favorites is Rights Law. If you know Jim, I think it's Jim and Pete Wright, and I think their wife's name is Pam. But anyway, they have a website that is designed for parents because they are parent attorneys, advocates, but they have a great page on just Section 504, and it has bang, 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 all the Section 504 letters from OSEP in a more user-friendly one than the Office for Civil Rights has, or Department of Ed. So that's a great one. Okay, so to wrap this up, I want to let you know what we have available here at Region 10. So because this continues to be a topic, and as we are all learning together, I'm getting ready to send out a SMORE newsletter. And one of the things that I'm going to put in the newsletter, there's a new law that came out that says that we have to start tracking our through PEEMS, our 504 students and students that are in RTI. And talked with the Peens person a little bit, and she said that she is, well, she talked with somebody from TA who says, we're not ready. We're not quite ready for that. However, the schools are supposed to be doing that September the 1st. So how that looks is probably going to be different in each school, but I don't want you guys to get caught off guard because I think some people are already doing it. I think it's going to be a good thing to know how many 504 students that we have if you don't know it already. Part of this came out of, there was a big issue with special ed 8.5%. It came out in a news article in the Houston, well, it came out in the Austin Chronicle, but it's the guy that works for the Houston Chronicle. And talking about our low numbers of special ed students. Well, one of the things that we said is the reason why we have low numbers of special ed students is because we have our kids like dyslexia, where in other states they would be included in our special ed. They're not included here. He wasn't very complimentary about 504. Pretty much said it was a way to get kids, to keep kids out of special ed and RTI also. So that's one of the reasons why the law has come up, and I will try to give you more guidance once I find out about it, but just want you to know what the law says and that we have to start looking at what we're doing for students that are 504, receiving 504 services and in our RTI programs. So some of the assistance that you get from Region 10 is, I mentioned the sample forms provided by the Council of Educators for Students with Disabilities. They come out in November. I will go to their training in November, and when I a little bit later in the month, then they send those out, and I'll send those out, like I said, to the directors or anybody else that asks. We have sample accommodation folders, 504 folders, and I don't do the RTI as much because I'm trying not to get over into other stuff, but you've seen the green folders, you've seen the yellow folders. If you need those, let me know. I tell people just take a look at them. It may be something that you want to do. You may want to use them, or you may want to create something your own that's similar. But I am able to purchase within reason a number of those if you want to use those for your school. We have the General Educator's Guide to Accommodations DVD. I think that's really good. That would be one of the continual training things that if you wanted to, especially new people that are coming in, I think it's really very good. There's another one that I just found out that I'm using in my training that's done by Jim Walsh. It is so good. It's really funny, and it makes it interesting. It's Section 504, and students or Principal Do Right gets it. And it's talking about really the basics of what Section 504 is and the responsibility to find of child fine and to make sure that you're getting the right students. The other one is a Section 504 desktop reference. It's a one-pager laminated, but it gives you pretty much the nuts and bolts of 504. I have plenty of those if people would like those. Online and face-to-face training, this is my first. Well, we do have a webinar that is online that probably need to highlight that Jose Martin did last year, and I'm thinking everything is still pretty good on there. I don't think there's been too many changes in the areas that you talked about. I'm available to come out to your campus or school district, or even talk to you, or you can come to me if you're, having some questions or you're struggling, in an area, to help problem solve. Do a program review. We don't do folder reviews on this, but could do a program review and look at the different areas in a little bit more detail than what we talked about today. And then the other thing that people may not know, if you're part of our administration cooperative, you also have access to lawyers for Section 504 questions, and that is Jose Martin usually and Dave Richards, and you just give them a call and tell them you're a Region 10 district and whatever question you have, and they will answer it. And they bill us monthly. They let us know kind of the topic of the question and then what they're no, they don't always give us the answer, but they let us know the topic of the question and stuff. And I think some of this is how they determine what they're going to talk about in our next, the things that are coming up that they talk about in our next training. So those are things that are available to you. I'm also open to if there's some other things that you have seen, like I said, within reason, um, some books or other resources. We'll be happy to purchase those for you. And contact me if you need anything. Again, that's why I'm here. I'm trying to make this training a little bit more robust. We will have on October 2nd Kelly Smith. She's going to talk about 504 and ADHD. That was a big, when I did the survey from people asking what it is that they were interested in, that was one of them. Also going to do one on accommodations. I don't have that done yet, a date for that, because we had to switch the date. And we are also, next year in January, our building's going to be under remodeling. So not sure where some of our sessions are going to be because we have to move them. So those things will be coming. If you look on our Section 504 website, there is a link to the calendar. I'm hoping it's working. And in that link, it will have what's coming up. I also want to remind you about the consortium that is done by Debbie Gaunt in Capel. And I believe the date, it's that Monday in September. Give me just a minute. It's going to be on September 25th. So if you go on the Section 504 page and you click on the calendar, or I'm not sure what it's called. I think it's 2017-2018 calendar. It'll take you to a Google Sheet, which will have the dates for those and who the speakers are, because she's got a good lineup of our lawyers. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate you joining me and helping me out with this one. If there's anything that I need to change that you think would be more helpful for you in this format, let me know. I am recording this session and it will be on our YouTube website, but I'll also put a link probably on the web page. We are in the process of curating information together, so it may take me a little bit of time, but I am committed to doing what you guys need, and I'm hoping that this was helpful to you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And let me just ask, are there any questions either?